I love The Lord of the Rings. I love the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Where did this start for me? When I was a child, my grandmother and my aunt, but especially my grandmother, taught me how to read almost adult level and do third, fourth, fifth grade math by the time I was like 4 years old. And I started reading, I guess, Hardy Boys, kind of like young adult type of stuff, you know. And then one day I was punished. I was sent into one of the bedrooms with no TV or anything. And this was back in like 1978. And I guess it was no toys, no TV. I was supposed to sit there in silence or whatever. And I guess they didn't notice the shelves of books on the wall. I kind of looked up and there were a bunch of classics up there. Dune by Frank Herbert. A couple of like The Invisible Man, World of Worlds, stuff like that. And what caught my attention though was a book called The Fellowship of the Ring. Although as I learned later, that's a volume because The Lord of the Rings is one book, published in 3 volumes: The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. And I read I would say a third of The Fellowship of the Ring in the 2 hours I was stuck in my punishment, and kept reading after that. And reading became my escape. I probably, by the time I was 15, I think I've read more than 2,000 or 3,000 books. I would literally have piles of books with me at all times, just reading them constantly. I'm 48 now. I've read The Lord of the Rings over 150 times. That when I was a kid, I'd read it 10, 12 times a year. But I hit 100 by the time I was 20, and then after that, it was like once or twice. It was once a year type of thing. Well over 100 by the time I was 20. I've read The Hobbit over 100 times, Silmarillion over 100 times, History of Middle Earth, which I believe is the 10-volume one, like multiple times. Unfinished Tales, like 30, 40 times. And I can go on. I've loved the material. Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, something anyone who's a Tolkien fan should read. So Lord of the Rings was my gateway into, reading and what a book should be, what writing should be, the ability to create on a page, to world build with 3 sentences, to give you a sense of something that is in the past, And I will go on later when I get to the segment about Amazon's The Rings of Power, about what Tolkien created. But I should give you my opinion on the films. Okay. Now I love the 70s animated films. They're all The Hobbit's the better one, but the other 2 are good as well. Fellowship of the Ring and Return of the King. The animation's good. I mean, it's just the storytelling a little off. The music is awesome. Peter Jackson's films, as films, were masterworks. I'm a purist enough about the books that there's some changes in the movies, like the stupidest one was the Army of the Undead, the Piranha Army of the Undead. That was the only point in the entire film that I actually laughed out loud. But for the most part, in the theatrical versions, they're enjoyable for me to watch. I've watched the extended versions once. The changes were too much for me to even consider them to be films, to be an adaptation. Okay? I respect others who love them, but to me, the changes, especially shown in the extended editions, deviated too much, right, for me to consider them to be quality. So where does that? What should be the next part of this be? Well, the rights issues with the Lord of the Rings. My understanding is that Professor Tolkien sold away the rights, the movie and TV rights to the Lord of the Rings, a long time ago. He didn't. I don't think he either didn't respect the medium or didn't think Lord of the Rings could be done in the medium, and he's probably right until the special effects of the last 30 years or so appeared. And so he sold them for some money under the concept that he didn't think it would ever go anywhere and wouldn't respect it if it did. Well, Amazon has purchased a set of rights from the rights holder who New Line, which was the company Peter Jackson, the production company that Peter Jackson worked with, got it from, had a limited version of the rights, meaning the Tolkien estate sold another set of TV rights as long as there's none of the original material in Lord of the Rings is basically touched, meaning they can't add on to it, they can't show different versions of the events of the Second Age or whatever. They have to fit whatever they're doing in, okay? But they're allowed to create new stuff, and that's where we run into the problem, okay? So to put this into perspective, okay, this needs to get a little bit political, okay? My bigger problem with the dwarf is that the female dwarf presented is that she doesn't have a beard, okay? I actually have no problem. Like, I love Idris Elba as Tyr, as Heimdall in the Thor movies, okay? Because those were aliens who the humans took their gods from, not that they were the actual ancient worship gods, you know? I also think, in the sense of, you can have actors who aren't of that ethnicity play the role as long as they set up the suspension of disbelief and tell you ahead of time, you know, not that I wanted this, but let's say Denzel Washington casts Aragorn in Peter Jackson's films, and say, look, we're casting him as Denzel because he's a great actor, he's a physical guy, he can carry the role, and we're telling you, we're not saying that Aragorn was of a black man of African descent or anything. We're not saying that. We're presenting you with a great actor who we think can present you the best Aragorn. So you prepared your suspension of disbelief. That would have been a hypothetical. I'm not saying it should have been. I'm just saying it's a hypothetical. Okay. So having the black actress play the female dwarf, if they had gone from the approach of, well, we're just having a great actress play the dwarf and put a beard on her, I personally could have lived with that. And people who make complaints saying, "Oh, that's woke too." Well, what are the people in Nigeria or Zambia supposed to do if they put on a European story? Are they supposed to only have the 10 European kids living in the country play all the roles? Are they supposed to pay to import Europeans to play all the roles? And if they want to put on Julius Caesar in Ghana, not Ghana, sorry, Liberia or something, any country that's predominantly African descent, you know. Likewise, I'm not saying people should be doing blackface or whiteface. That stuff is stupid. Just let the actor play the role. If it is different, Now that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to have the role be of the appropriate ethnicity, but not for the visual reason. Not because you want to match races, because some stories are set in particular times and places. And here's where Amazon's going to run into a problem, which many people have commented about. This video isn't about the complaints, because if I just complain and say, "Oh, this is going to suck," no, half the people are going to either stop watching and say this is just another anti-woke troll, and the other half of people are going to say, want me to scream and rant about this. I can do either, okay? I'm just telling you, in layman's terms, because I speak New Jersey Italian. You see my hands moving? I'm telling you in layman's terms, what is the problem with some of the changes in this movie? Okay, and right before I do that, I'm going to tell you why they're doing it is ineffective in the wrong way. Okay, you do not advance the cause of a lack of diversity by taking another ethnicity's product and putting your different ethnicity stamp on it. Okay, the way you get more African fantasy representation, for example, is to go look at the works of African folklore, of African legends. I'm not as up on it. I know Japanese, Chinese, many of the Europeans, as Norse, Italian, and all that, Irish, the Celtics, the Celts and Romans from the Italian area. Bit of Russian, some American Indian and South American Indian. I don't know anything about the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, and I have a kind of concept of African mythology and lore. It's something I really want to read into more as I age. But for Anansi, that's the one thing I know a lot. I've seen over time. I know they're a fantasy set. I haven't read any. I know Neil Gaiman has done some work in the area, obviously. Anansi Boys. But there are traditional fantasies set in these other cultures. Let's get those and let's advance those and put those in the visual medium, and that's how you get proper representation. That is how you advance your cause, okay? And because that's good material, and you don't need to take good material from European cultures and confiscate it, so to speak. You need to be more inclusive. You need to get more material from the other cultures and bring them into the pot, so to speak. You know, so that's the main real problem with why the stated purpose of wokeism fails. Now, why really the wokeism, however, is not about that. And the people who think these hardcore leftists are supporting them because they want more inclusion, they don't. White liberal leftists are the most racist people in the world because they're Marxist. Marxists want to use these racial tones to divide people, to subvert existing power structures so they can take it over. And once we have, the Black Lord of the Rings, for example, or the Chinese Lord of the Rings or whatever, they'll just, and they use it as they get rid of power, they'll stomp you just the way they stomped European civilizations. Okay, so with that in mind, what changes are they doing here that I've seen so far? Why are those changes bad? Okay, so what is Lord of the Rings? Lord of the Rings was the creation of J.R.R. Tolkien, his legendarium as we would call it, when he found I guess you would say, the mythology of England to be lacking. England was settled originally by waves, by obviously in most ancient times Celts, but then the next wave, but they disappeared. The English Celts largely disappeared. Only the Celts in Wales, Scotland, Ireland remained. Okay, but the waves of German peoples, okay, I believe they're the Western German tribes, spread to Western Europe and across into England, Angleland. Okay, the Angles were, I believe, the first surviving group. Then the Saxons, another Germanic group. So the Anglo-Saxons. Okay, they adopted a lot of Celtic folklore and had a lot of Roman folklore, and legends and so forth. So when Tolkien looked at it, our original folklore should be German in origin. We should have stories about elves and dwarves and Odin and the Germanic version of it, and so forth. Okay, now the surviving examples of that ancient culture eventually became what we call Norse, the Norse culture, so to speak. Okay, and if you ever want, here's a good book. The Viking Spirit by Daniel McCoy, written about 5 years ago. It's a scholarly type tome. It goes over the Viking, the mythology and religions of the Viking Age. Good read. Okay? If you want to get a summary of that, or you can go read the actual surviving material, like the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, and so forth, so on and so forth, the Athletic Sagas. But that sort of lore should have been the Anglo-Saxon heritage of mythology and folklore. Some of it survived, but most of what the Germanic peoples got was either Roman influenced or Celtic, and Tolkien found that lacking. So he created a legendarium founded in Germanic and Norse folklore for the English people. It's obviously fictional, but he deliberately set it as if it occurred in the real world. Time period wise, it occurred about 20,000 years earlier, give or take, in Europe, like Western and Northern Europe primarily, where the Germanic peoples would have been. Okay, it was between several ice ages. This is science. This part's of science. The ice ages come and go. The glacial caps expand and contract. We're between two of them right now. This would have been, I believe, two back, if I remember the lore correctly. Don't quote me on that. My memory as I age gets a little shaky. Okay. But I can look. It is something you can look up. And he uses a lot. He pulls those Germanic concepts, those Norse concepts. But Tolkien was also a devout Catholic, pre-Vatican II. So he wanted what he created, his mythology, to be something that worked with his Catholic beliefs. So he could have this fictional mythology and say the moral values here, the beings, they're compliant, because he was creating something that could have existed. That was his goal here. Okay, right? So, um, and Tolkien was an educated man for his time. Um, he lived up until the year, I believe the year I was born, in 1973 or 75. I never remember, to be honest, which of the two. He basically lived to just after I was born. And he was an educated man. He was not a scientist per se, but he knew of science, of the discoveries of the day, and kind of. So for example, obviously they knew the sun was a star around floating ball of gas. For centuries we've known that. It was almost 200 years before that they discerned that. Um, so, but his original concept when the Valar created the solar system, um, there was no sun. They had to create artificial light sources, and the Earth was flat. And he explained his continuity. Eventually, Yuvatar, Yahweh, God created the sun and made the Earth round, and that's how we got into the legendary construct today. Now the setup for this is in the myth, Tolkien was digging through an attic, so to speak, and found a very old book, the Red Book of Westmarch, which was written by Bilbo, Frodo, and Samwise over the time. Which, if you've read the books or seen the movies, you've seen them writing in this. And he found it, and that's how this ancient lore was found, the ancient lore of England. Okay, so what is this ancient lore based on? Okay, here are the facts you need to know. Okay? The ancient beings of power. In the beginning, there was Iluvatar, who's basically God, Yahweh. Okay, he was alone in the infinite void. He wanted to create a universe, so he first needed a plan, and he wanted to make a song to create the plan. It's one of the cooler things in the Silmarillion is to read this song. By the way, the Song of the Ainur. It's in the Ainur Dale. So he created the angels, the beings of light first. Okay. And they sang with him. And one of the two most powerful ones were Manwë and Melkor. Melkor is basically Satan. He is Satan. So outright states he's his literary version of Satan. Okay. And I'm not going to go through the whole story here, but these beings of light were angels, and some of them went into Ea, the universe. So the Quenya is the one language Tolkien made up. Ea is the universe. They traveled throughout the universe, creating all the stars. Manwë's wife did that. Then they went to our solar system and found a formless lump of mass, which Ul the Smith, another Valar, shaped into the earth. Melkor came to the earth and began to put his power into it to try to warp it to his will. Well, that's kind of the story, the backstory, in very simple terms. Okay, so the beings of light were basically angels and like the Norse gods. Those are your prototypes for these beings, okay? And the lesser of them, the greater is called the Valar, the lesser of the Maiar. Gandalf is a Maiar. He's a spiritual being, a being of light, okay? So keep that in mind, okay? So what's another thing you need to know? What are elves?